Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Mondays with Mundy. That's me, Jim Mundy, the historian for the Union League Legacy Foundation. And if you've been watching these videos over the last year, you've gotten pretty used to seeing a specific background behind me. That is my humble library at home. But today we're broadcasting from the Heritage Center at the Union League of Philadelphia, which is the home of the Union League Legacy Foundation. And we are in the vault. So this is where we keep all of our goodies, if you will. This is our institutional and Civil War historical collection of both two-dimensional, that is paper-based archival material, and also three-dimensional based, that is objects in the collection as well. So, and we've been collecting things since 1863. So, and it's all in here, which is amazing. So, but also in here, though, are some incredible treasures that are unique to any institution, not just in Philadelphia, but in the country itself. We're going to talk about two of them specifically in this episode. So, we're going back in time to April of 1865. It saw the triumph on April the 9th of the Union Army victory, if you will, over the Confederate Army when Robert E. Lee surrendered to Ulysses S. Grant at Appomattox Courthouse on April the 9th of 1865. For all intents and purposes, ending the Civil War, right? And then less than a week later, on April the 14th, John Wilkes Booth would assassinate Abraham Lincoln, bringing a whole new level of tragedy into what had been 4 years of tragedy to begin with. So the objects we're talking about relate to basically the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. So the first one we're going to show you is right here, and it is called the Tanner Manuscript. I hope you can see this. All right, okay, that's what it looks like. All right, so let us, pun intended, set the stage. It is April the 14th in Ford's Theater. Abraham Lincoln loved the theater, was a great fan of Shakespeare, as a matter of fact, which is why he was always a fan of John Wilkes Booth and his brother Edwin, who were the two greatest Shakespearean actors in America at this point in time. Right? And the play that evening, Our American Cousin, was actually a benefit for the lead actress, who was retiring from the theater that night. And so the Lincolns wanted to make sure to go there. Now, with the Lincolns were supposed to be the Grants, but Mrs. Grant didn't like Mrs. Lincoln, so the Grants made an excuse to visit one of their sons going to school outside of Philadelphia. And instead, it was Major Henry Rathbone, U.S. Army, and his fiancee, Clara Harris, instead. So I hope some of you, if not all of you, have been to Ford's Theater, because it really is an amazing place to see. And if you're sitting in the theater and you're looking at the stage, the presidential box was on the right-hand side, about 12 feet high off the stage level itself. All right, okay. And then there was another box directly opposite on the left-hand side as you look at the stage. All right. So we all know what happened in Ford's Theater, right? So after Lincoln was shot, he was taken across the street to the Peterson house, directly across the street. And it was like you thought of your home. Walk in the front door, there's a hallway, there was a front parlor, a middle parlor, and then in the very back, in an L section, was the bedroom where Lincoln lay dying. And at midnight, Edwin Stanton, the Secretary of War, who is now basically running the country because Lincoln's been shot, they can't find Andrew Johnson, and William Seward, the Secretary of State, who's number 3 in line, had also been attacked by an assassin and was near death himself. So Stanton's running the country, and he wants to basically interrogate eyewitnesses to the assassination. And there's people who were in Ford's Theater and witnessed this assassination. So they begin to take these eyewitness testimonies down in longhand, and clearly that's not going to work. So they call out for somebody who could take polygraphy, or the 19th century version of stenography. And it just so happened that living next door to the Peterson house was Corporal James Tanner. Now, James Tanner was from Richmondville, New York, Schoharie County, about 60 miles due west of Albany. He joined the 87th New York in 1861. He was a young kid in his teens when he joined. August 30th, 1862, second Battle Bull Run. Tanner would lose both of his legs below the knee to a cannonball and would become crippled the rest of his life. But he survived, and he did more than that. He became very successful afterwards as a polygrapher because he went to school in Syracuse, the Ames Business School, and when recovered enough, went back to Washington, D.C., and got a job working in the Ordnance Department, ironically enough, but lived next to the Peterson house. So when the call went out for a polygrapher, Tanner hobbled down the steps on his two prosthetic legs and went into the middle parlor of the Peterson house, and for the next hour and a half recorded 8 eyewitness testimonies to either Seward's assassination attempt or to Lincoln's himself. Okay. He wrote everything down in shorthand, obviously, and then, not wanting to forget anything he had written down, Tanner stayed in the Peterson house and wrote everything out in longhand. And that took until very early in the morning. And he was still in the Peterson house then at 7:22 and in the room when Abraham Lincoln died. So in 1905, on the 40th anniversary of the assassination, the Washington Post asked if anybody was still around who was there that fateful night. And Tanner basically raised his hand and said, not only was I there, look what I have, because he was able to keep his original shorthand and longhand notes. And it is at that point we believe that Tanner's son, James, who was a lawyer here in Philadelphia, believe it or not, took his father's shorthand and longhand notes and glued them onto sheets of linen and then bound them together. And that is what we call today the Tanner Manuscript. So I'm going to show you what the shorthand looks like. And that is it. Okay. That is calligraphy from 1865. I understand it looks like Gibbs, but I haven't a clue, to be honest. And here we have the longhand version of that very same shorthand testimony. Now, this happens to be the testimony of James Ferguson. Ferguson owned the Greenback Saloon that was immediately to the left of Ford's Theater. And Ferguson was a great fan of General Grant's, and that's why he wanted to be at the theater to see General Grant himself. And after all, why not? Grant was the victorious general for the Union Army. But obviously John Wilkes Booth had other plans. So let me read you Ferguson's testimony as it was recorded in the early morning of April the 15th of 1865. Mr. Ford came to me today about 1 or 2 o'clock and told me that my favorite General Grant was going to be present at the theater tonight and had secured a box. I went in the theater and engaged seats 58 and 59 on the opposite side from the president's box. When the president came in, I saw that General Grant was not with him, but I still kept watch of the box, expecting General Grant to come in, knowing that if he came in, he would go in the same box with the president. After the curtain went up for the third act, I saw Mr. Booth go to the door leading to the passage of the private box which the president occupied and tried the door. In a moment afterwards, I was looking with an opera glass to see who the citizen was that was with the president. I then heard the report of the pistol and saw Mrs. Lincoln catch him around the neck. I saw him, that is, President Lincoln, throw up his right arm, and at the same time I saw Booth move his hand to his side and pull a knife and move between Mrs. Lincoln and a lady in the same box. He, that is Booth, put his hands in the cushion of the box and threw his feet right over. As he jumped over, he pulled part of the state flag off and had part of it under his feet when he fell to the stage. The very moment he struck, he exclaimed, "Sic semper tyrannis." As he came across the stage facing me, he looked me right in the face, and it alarmed me, and I pulled the lady who was with me down behind the banister. I looked right down at him, and he stopped as he said, "I have done it," and he shook the knife. And with that, Booth ran off stage, jumped on his horse, and would meet his own death less than 2 weeks later at a farm in Port Royal, Virginia. So I get a chill down my spine every time I read that. I mean, just imagine sitting in Ford's Theater and looking the way that Ferguson was looking across the stage and seeing Booth shoot Abraham Lincoln. Now, keep in mind, Booth was trying to basically decapitate the federal government. He had 4 targets, right? Lincoln, Johnson, Seward, and Grant. Okay. Now, Booth was an actor, and at this point, I think it's fair to say he was a little emotionally unraveled, to say the very least. Not least of all because he thought he would actually shoot Abraham Lincoln with a 1-bullet Derringer that ironically was made here in Philadelphia. And then number 2, he was going to stab U.S. Grant to death. Now, U.S. Grant had been in the field with the Army of the Potomac since March of 1864, over a year. Booth didn't stand a chance against Grant, to be honest, right? Even because at this point he's lost the element of surprise. So Booth, don't forget, was an actor, and this is going to be his last performance as well, right? Okay, and Booth was a Shakespearean actor because, after all, where did Booth get the line "Sic semper tyrannis"? Anybody know what it means? All right, thus always to tyrants. Now, where did that line come from? How about Shakespeare's play Julius Caesar, because that's what Brutus said as he was stabbing Julius Caesar. sic semper tyrannis, thus always to tyrants. So Booth is now playing Brutus to Abraham Lincoln's Julius Caesar. Another shiver down my spine when I think about that. So anyway, all right. So Abraham Lincoln died at 7:22 that morning. And very quickly, the Quartermaster Corps arrived with an ambulance, a casket, and 6 Quartermaster Corps soldiers who were going to escort the body back to the White House, which is what they did. And they carried the body, the casket, if you will, up to the 2nd floor bedroom in the White House, where an army surgeon named Joseph Woodward from Philadelphia was waiting to do an autopsy. And when Woodward was finished with the autopsy, the mortician would then embalm the body, because keep in mind, there was no refrigeration at this point in time. So it's important to preserve the body as quickly as possible. So, all right. So the 6 soldiers, as you can imagine, very honorably and gracefully put Lincoln's body on the table. Woodward would take the clothes off the body for the autopsy and then put them in the casket. And it was at this point that the commanding general of that detail, Daniel Rucker, reaches in the casket, pulls out the linen shirt that Lincoln was wearing when he was shot and when he died, and cuts off 6 pieces and gives one to each of those 6 soldiers as his way of saying, for duty above and beyond what you had any expectation to do on behalf of your country. And what we have here is one of those 6 pieces of Lincoln's shirt. And that is it. I hope you can see that okay. All right. It was given to the League a little over 10 years ago by a League member named Dr. Ralph Bernard. And that's because he is the great-great-grandson of this gentleman here. This is John C. Weaver. And Mr. Weaver was one of the 6 Quartermaster Corps soldiers in that escort of Lincoln's body to the White House and up into that bedroom itself. So John Weaver came back to Philadelphia, and he was a very humble man. He was a mailman, a postman, right? But he also joined something called the Grand Army of the Republic, which was the enlisted man's veterans organization. And they had posts, and he belonged to a post. And they would have, weekly, monthly meetings. And so apparently Weaver, according to Dr. Bernard, would put on a jacket, and he would take that piece of cloth and he would fold it. And you can see the creases in it, we call memory folds. And if you look even closer, you're going to see pinholes, okay? And you can see them all through here, okay? Those are pinholes, because what Weaver did is that when he had the chance to go out with a jacket on, he would take that cloth, fold it up, and then pin it on the inside left part of his jacket, right? Because when he did that and he closed his jacket, the cloth would cover his heart. Pretty amazing, isn't it? The things, So Weaver didn't treat it like a relic and put it in a reliquary. It was a very personal object to him, clearly. And we also saw how dirty it was at the same time, because obviously Weaver was handling it quite frequently. So luckily for us, Dr. Bernard was cleaning out his house in Ballackinwood. He thought, where do I put this? And he gave it to the Union League of Philadelphia, the Abraham Lincoln Foundation, as it was back then. And today, now it's the Union League Legacy Foundation. So there are 2 really pretty amazing relics, shall we say, from the Civil War period, specifically April of 1865. So this is some of the good stuff that we have here. We've got other things as well, but this isn't a full-length movie epic, so I've got to stop talking and say thank you for watching once again. I hope everybody enjoyed this episode. I hope you enjoyed the change of location and the lack of a PowerPoint. I think it's nice to see things, actually. And and if next year, assuming that the COVID pandemic is completely over and we go back to what we thought of as normal life, in February, the Legacy Foundation hosts an annual open house where the League is open for tours of the building to the general public. And at that open house, we always have, shall we say, a show and tell. And so you have another chance to actually come into the League itself and see these actual objects from the collection that relate to Abraham Lincoln. And you'll see many, many others as well. So do come back and visit us sometime. All right. So in the meantime, thanks for watching another episode of Mondays with Mundy. It is greatly appreciated. Another shout out to the Legacy Foundation for hosting these. And until we see each other the next time, stay safe and stay well and get your flu shot. Thanks, everybody. Goodbye.